Gracie Jiu-Jitsu rocks. Welcome to the Gracie Jiu-Jitsu Rocks podcast, a podcast dedicated to Gracie Jiu-Jitsu and all things Gracie, including self-defense, competition, anti-bullying, women's self-defense and empowerment, nutrition, and most especially, the people involved in Gracie Jiu-Jitsu. This podcast is for the average Joe. It's for anyone who practices, trains, teaches, or just loves to talk about or hear about Gracie Jiu-Jitsu. We'll explore the lives of Gracie Jiu-Jitsu practitioners, how they got involved in the art, and what effect it's had on their lives. So buckle up and enjoy the ride. Welcome to episode 70 of the Gracie Jiu-Jitsu Rocks podcast. As always, I'm your host, Marty Josie, and thanks for listening. My guest today is Torres Gracie. But before we get to that, let's do our Jiu-Jitsu quote. And that quote is, "Learn Gracie Jiu-Jitsu so that when a giant walks by, you don't think to yourself, oh no. You think to yourself, how interesting." And that quote is from Rener Gracie. Okay, Torres Gracie is a very interesting and successful person. She heads up the Women's Empowered program for the Gracie Academy in Torrance, California. She's been a WWE diva and in fact won the WWE Diva Championship 3 times. She's appeared in movies such as Scorpion King 4 and Jackie Chan's Skip Chase, as well as television with a role in Supergirl and the NBC primetime reality show Stars Earn Stripes, where she and her partner won the overall competition for that show. She's been a professional dancer and model, and has inspired and impacted the lives of countless individuals and groups. And oh yeah, she's also married to the one and only Henner Gracie. So I know you're going to enjoy this interview with Eve. After the interview, stay tuned for the Make a Difference, Make an Impact segment. Okay, without further ado, let's talk with Eve. Okay, I'm speaking with Torres Gracie. So welcome to the show, Eve, and thank you so much for taking time to speak with us today.
Thanks, Marty. Glad to be here.
All right. So you've done a lot in your lifetime so far, which is awesome since you're still very young, and I'm sure you have a lot more to do going forward. And I want to discuss, as much of that as possible. But to get us started, if you would, can you just briefly share where you're from and what it was like growing up as Eve Torres? And then we'll get more into your various careers and those things.
Yeah, sure. I grew up in Denver, Colorado, and I don't know what much to say that's, interesting about my childhood. I was very active. I was a gymnast and a dancer growing up, and I was very academic. I ended up going to USC for on a full tuition scholarship for engineering.
Nice.
And clearly didn't use it, but that's another story.
Yeah.
Was raised, I have a brother and sister, raised in Denver, and then moved to LA for school, actually, because I went to USC. So I moved out here when I was, about 17, and I've been in LA ever since.
Nice. Was it a hard transition or pretty easy going from Denver to LA?
Oh, it was pretty easy. I think it was more of a college transition, and I've always said that I'm very grateful I moved to LA for school as opposed to people who moved to LA to join, the entertainment industry, and they just get dropped off here in the middle of nowhere and they don't have any way to make friends or know people. So I had a great support system because it was a university setting. And I also had my sister who lived out here, and I also had uncles that lived fairly close. So I definitely felt like I had a support group.
That's great.
And I just stayed for the weather and the boy. Ended up staying out here.
Awesome. And even though you didn't go out there for the entertainment, you certainly got into that later on for sure.
Yeah, and when I was in college, it was something that always called to me, probably from starting about high school, where I was, more into the performance side of things with dance teams, and so it wasn't until, it was basically college when I knew that I wanted to pursue the entertainment industry, but I just told myself, because it happens so many times where you're at this age and you're in LA. These opportunities come knocking, and you might be able to take them, but then you have to put off your education. So I just told myself, I'm going to finish, I'm going to finish my degree. And then it was kind of like what I needed to say, okay, now you can do whatever you want, because you have a backup plan. If everything else fails, I have my engineering degree to fall back on. And I felt, so I feel like that kind of allowed me to be freer with my choices and, what I wanted to do after I graduated.
And I really admire and respect that, because, so many people that given the first opportunity for something kind of new and shiny, they'll jump at it. But
right.
you stayed the course. Yeah, stayed the course and say, hey, I'm going to build this foundation I can always rely on or fall back on if needed. So that's great.
Sure.
So how did you get into, I know you did some, like you mentioned, a lot of dancing and everything. I think you were a dancer for the NBA and other things. And how did you get into the WWE? How did that happen?
Yeah. So when I finished college, basically the first kind of area I dabbled into was professional dance world. I danced for the LA Clippers, and I landed a few kind of dance/television jobs. And then the opportunity for the Diva Search, which was the WWE's way of kind of finding new female talent, came up. And it was something that I said, okay, I just looked at all the elements of what it kind of incorporated, which was obviously, competition and athletics. It was travel, it was these kind of strong female characters. And I don't know, I really felt like this was something that kind of fit well for me. I wasn't sure in the beginning, but I said, you know what, let's give it a try. And so I ended up doing that. I went out for the Diva Search, and I ended up winning. So I won a contract with WWE, and that was my contract. Basically started like January of 2008 was pretty much when I started on the road with WWE, and I was right. Ultimately, I felt like everything that it kind of offered me at that time in my life was all these things that I loved. The theatrical aspect, the competition aspect, the fighting aspect, of course. It was kind of a combination of all of those things. And then I got to travel the world and do something that I really enjoyed doing.
Very exciting. Very exciting. I can't even imagine, though, the amount of how rigorous that competition was, just to win that. And then much less how rigorous the schedule you had to maintain while doing WWE.
Yeah, definitely the rigorous part was the competition was kind of, I felt like that was a fate kind of telling me this was the way for me to go. But I mean, the real hard work starts when once I signed with WWE, because especially when you don't come from a wrestling background, there's a lot of proving to do, I guess you would say. So, it was just a lot of, it was a lot of travel. It was kind of emotionally pretty brutal in the beginning, because again, you're in this whole new world, and it's a little bit of like, you got to kind of earn your respect there. And you start off as a Diva Search winner who's never wrestled before. So, it took a little while for me to really kind of get comfortable and feel like I was in the groove of things there. But by far the hardest part about WWE was the travel. I would travel, basically, I was gone 5 days a week, and you're in a different city every day. And so people don't really realize like the kind of life that we live on the road. But, I would fly into a city on a Friday morning. I would leave at like 4 a.m. I leave my house at like 4 a.m. on a Friday, get to the airport, fly out by like 6 a.m., land wherever I was, usually somewhere in like the South or East Coast, because that's where most of our shows were, but every once in a while we'd be on the West Coast. You get there, you ultimately kind of grab a bite to eat, and then you head to the arena where you're going to be doing a show that night. You get ready for the show, you wrestle, and then after the show, you get into your rental car and you drive, you and whoever you're kind of partnered with that week. Usually you just find out I would find out what other girls are on the road with me that weekend, and we plan to drive together. We get in our rental cars and we drive to the next town for like sometimes 4 or 5, 6 hour drives, depending on, where we were to the next town. You sleep in a little bit, you go to the gym, you go to the arena, you do it all again. And this is every single, this is year round. There's no like season for WWE. It's year round, 5 days a week. And it's not like you're ever in a place where you're like, oh, let's go check out, this nice area.
Yeah, see the sights or whatever.
No, you never really got to see the sights. I mean, it'd be very rare because you're always because you're in a different city every day. You pretty much gotta, you get there and you drive out that night. So that was, that for sure was the hardest part. And then, it's hard for your body to recover.
Oh yeah.
That kind of travel when you're constantly on planes and in cars and driving. That was the most grueling part for me. And I think for anyone, if you would ask them, in that world.
I think you're right about people not understanding that, though, because for most people, if they just casually, watch it on TV, it just seems like kind of a glamorous, fun thing. It must be great to be in that world, but man, the reality is quite different.
Yeah, and back in the day, it was just the wrestling business. It was like, and that's kind of where their model started from. But you compare that to any other kind of shows now, like if you look at other like musician tours or anything like that. I mean, they have buses that drive them everywhere. Like there's just it's just a different system. So they kind of kept the same system, and ultimately it works. Everyone gets there, everyone kind of does their own thing, and that's the nice part, I guess, about driving your own car is you get to eat where you want, you get to go to the gym whenever you want, you get to, you have a little bit more freedom in terms of what you do every day. But yeah, it was a lot of driving. I put in my time behind the wheel driving throughout the entire U.S. I've probably been to every little podunk town you've ever heard of. I've driven through it. So,
well,
but that's, again, that's the fun part. It's like, you're exhausted and you're like, why are we here? But then sometimes that's where you make some of the best memories,
Yeah. I was going to say it had to be brutal, constantly on the road, but sometimes when, driving down the back roads of America can be very interesting experience and enlightening experience in a lot of ways.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what would you say you enjoyed the most about that era of your life and that experience?
I would say the constant pushing of my boundaries and pushing of my expectations of myself, because growing up, I was a really, really shy growing up, to the point where they almost thought I had a social anxiety kind of disorder, or something. They were a little concerned for a while that I was a little bit more shy than normal. And, I think it really took me finding dance and finding performance to really kind of learn to come out of that shell. So, I ultimately would find myself doing things that, if you had told me, 10 years prior or 15 years prior that I'd be doing some of the things I did, I just wouldn't have believed you. So it's things like, performing in front of 70,000 people at WrestleMania, or, wrestling, or having, these matches and pulling off these, matches or, moves in the match that were, I didn't think I could do at some point. Or I think that's really what my time in WWE taught me, is I can really pretty much do anything if I commit myself to it, and if I really prioritize it. And your body can go through a lot. You can go through a lot, you can do a lot, and you can, if you're really determined, you can pretty much do it all.
Wow. So
it's not always a good idea, because you drive yourself into the ground and you end up being really tired and really crazy. But I remember there's so many times I'm like, if I could do that, I could do this. It's like my boot camp for life.
Yeah.
But it also pushed me in terms of doing press conferences and speaking in front of 40,000 Boy Scouts at one point. Giving a talk to the Boys and Girls Club, over 10,000 kids. So there was so many opportunities that were given to me that I was really glad I got to take them, to say okay, I actually can do that. I can do public speaking, or I can't perform in front of this many people, or I can, wrestle in these types of matches. So
that's great.
I think everyone needs that experience in their life of saying, really testing getting out of your comfort zone, and then realizing oh, it's not so bad here. I managed. I'm okay. Well,
the old saying, you got to get out of your comfort zone to grow. And you certainly did that. And it led to that belief that if you can do this, you can, conquer anything. It always surprises me that, it surprises me to hear that you were really shy. And it always surprises me when I see someone that was, in the public eye and performing in front of just massive crowds, to learn that they're shy. There's like Michael Jackson, Prince, several people that, when they're in front of the crowd, they're doing it. But then kind of find out they're very extremely shy, but you included here. And so I'm surprised to know that, because even to go through like the competition, to me, if you're really shy, that would be hard to do, but you found a way to make it happen.
Yeah. And what's interesting is there really is a difference between kind of being an introvert and being a performer. And that's what I found. And so for me, I am definitely an introvert, and, have found myself kind of battling that in many times in my life, and also accepting it and realizing that's just who I am. Mm-hmm. But I think once you are performing, it's just it's a completely different element. It's not it's not personal anymore. It's not your personal preference. It's just something that, it's just something you do. It's like it's almost like something completely other than who you really are ultimately, because you're putting on a persona or a character, or you're doing a performance for other people. So you can kind of get out of your element when you are performing.
Very cool. Very cool. Thanks for the insight on that. At one point, you decided that chapter of your life, it was time to bring that to a close and transition. And you transitioned into the Women's Empowered program in Gracie Jiu-Jitsu. So tell us kind of what led to that, and how that went, and how you've really championed that cause.
Yeah, so we can rewind a little bit. So
sure.
Actually, around the time that I started WWE in 2008. And that was beginning of 2008. Now, I so happened to meet Rener Gracie the beginning of 2008. So pretty much I met him and started traveling with WWE at the same time. So the entire time that I was in WWE, Henner and I were, in a relationship, and I had started training jiu-jitsu in the beginning of 2008. So it wasn't until a couple years in, and obviously, my training, I did as much as I could while still traveling. But the Women Empowered program had existed for many years, but it had always been a kind of something they did twice a year for like 6 weeks at a time. And, Henner and I were just really trying to push the idea of having a women's class that's offered every week. That's only for women. And that was, ultimately Women Empowered would become a class every week. So that started in 2010. And, I would teach whenever I'd come back. But I always felt like, I was my foot was halfway in, and for obvious reasons. I mean, I had a full-time job and was, it was really hard for me to be able to commit. And we had even kind of scheduled the classes around when I would be in town. But then even that changed. So it was hard for me to fully commit to that program the way I wanted it to. And in the beginning, it felt like the growth had, it was steadily growing, but again, because I felt like I couldn't give it my all, I felt like it wasn't reaching its full potential. So, when finally, 5 years later, there was obviously multiple things that made me decide to end that chapter. One was definitely, like I said, saying, okay, I really want to dedicate myself to this program. And because I'd seen what it had done for so many women, and I had seen kind of the natural progression that was happening with it. And it was also just, I knew that was the direction my life was taking me. It was kind of where my passion really started to show, as opposed to what I was doing every week on the road with WWE. And then obviously aside from that, I mean, it's virtually impossible to manage it's one thing to have a relationship. It's another to start a family, or to, have a marriage. And I at some point said, I would like to be able to commit myself to a marriage and to Henner, and to know what that actually looks like, what our life will look like every day if I'm home instead of gone 5 days a week. So that was all kind of part of the choice to end my time there. I had also felt like I kind of reached a point where I had accomplished a lot of the things I set out to do. And I didn't really see there was and I've actually seen a lot of this change recently, which is really good to see. But at the time, there was very much a ceiling for the women there in WWE in terms of what kinds of roles they could play, in terms of their involvement in the company, in terms of what kind of opportunities they were given. And I just felt like, I was ready to not have some restrictions on how far I could go with something.
So you ended up kind of carrying the torch of the Women's Empowered, and I went through the Women's Empowered instructor program, and I remember Jim Pfeiffer and I were studying for that, and met you guys down in Destin at one of the first Gracie immersion camps, and you guys were leading the live portion of that instructor program. And of course, Henner and Heteron, but you and Victoria just did an amazing job of leading that training, facilitating that training. And I can't say enough about how you guys delivered that and how professional you are in that capacity.
Yeah, and I mean, it's been so amazing to watch the growth, even in the last 3 to 4 years. I mean, now our classes are, they're easily 60 plus women every class. And really just seeing, like I said, more than the numbers or anything else is two things. One, the number of women that are kind of transitioning from women empowered into training jiu-jitsu. And obviously women empowered ultimately is jiu-jitsu. We call it women empowered because for a woman who maybe doesn't identify herself with training jiu-jitsu, or they're not even familiar with jiu-jitsu, they're more familiar with the idea of self-defense. It's easier to market and to get a woman to, invest into a women's self-defense class than it is to a jiu-jitsu, class that maybe has men and women there. And so that's why having this women's only program was so important and women empowered. But the best part is that what they realize once they're there is like, oh, actually, I really love this jiu-jitsu stuff and I want to keep growing, and I want to see how this works against a male training partner. Or, and so naturally, once they're done with the Women Empowered program, or even sometimes at the same time, they start training our Combatives program, which is our beginners co-ed program. And, I've seen students start from Women Empowered, and now they're, blue belts and beyond. And it's just that's what's really awesome to watch, is just to see the number of women that are really just falling in love with jiu-jitsu through this program.
Absolutely.
But speaking their language, it's really important that we're speaking their language to begin with. Because I just think if a woman off the street who's never been exposed to jiu-jitsu, doesn't have a husband who does it, or any other idea, if you come in and say, hey, look at this cool sweep that you can do and from this position, and there's no context for them whatsoever.
Right.
So it just doesn't. But when you speak their language and you say, okay, here are the scenarios that are the most common and most dangerous threats against women, they can easily, all of them have imagined themselves in those situations before. Every single woman has known the potential for these types of situations to occur. And it's not hard. You don't have to sell them on that this is a possibility.
Right.
We all know it's part of our everyday life. So when you speak to that in these specific scenarios, and then you give them answers to those scenarios, it's like it just clicks so quickly. And I think that's why they just take to the program, and it's also, for when you think of anyone else kind of training jiu-jitsu, either for sport or for, or even a man training jiu-jitsu for self-defense, they have a different idea of what victory is. Whereas, like we always say, for women empowered, victory is just survival. It's survival. It's breaking away from the fight. It's getting to safety. It's not necessarily you have to finish the fight. Now, obviously, we learned that too, but it's just the whole mindset is a little bit different, and it's one that I identify with more. So I'm always very glad to kind of go back to Women Empowered, even though I obviously have trained beyond,
right.
And have sparring every day, or not every day. I wish I could spar every day. But sparring with, training partners with one mindset, it's important for me to always remember my self-defense mindset, which is the women empowered mindset, which is I don't have to tap this guy out on the street if I ever get in a situation. I need to do enough to get out and get to safety.
Absolutely.
I don't need to be a hero. I don't need to beat the guy up, whatever it is,
That's so important to remember. And I love teaching women's empowered. I love teaching jiu-jitsu, but it's so gratifying, like you said, to take someone who, was scared to even come in the door, and then to see them grow in confidence as they start learning these moves that can save their life, literally save their life. And just to see that smile come on their face and know that, you're seeing growth occur. It's great. Is there a story or two that comes to mind? I'm sure you have many that you could share about either a woman or girl that's been through the program that you've seen the impact in their life, or that's impacted your life by working with them, either one.
Yeah. Well, ultimately, what's interesting, I mean, I think every woman has their story and has their background. And I have my own, but what has been so so gratifying is hearing these, obviously what started as very unfortunate situations, but just seeing how resilient women are, and experiencing that resiliency through this program. And there's a couple, examples. Actually, there's more than that, but one's kind of off the top of my head. But there have been emails sent to me, Henner and I, about this program and what it has done for some women. And these are women who are survivors of either domestic violence or sexual assault. And just these emails, these are the type of emails that leave you just in tears because of how moving they are and how touching they are. There is one story in particular about a woman who was brutally assaulted on the beach. And she came in, we had a contact through her through one of our police officer friends who trains, and he was able to bring her in eventually. And she started training with us, and she had written a letter a while into her training, and she explained how she used to have recurring nightmares about the incident, reliving the incident in her mind. And she had a dream, finally, another nightmare, but this time in her nightmare, she submitted the guy using jujitsu. And she stopped having those nightmares. And that, to me, that just goes to show the power of what this can do for somebody who you are actually, altering the mind's belief and idea of what is possible for them. Wow. What is possible for them. And you're almost like replacing a memory or an idea about, what you can do, what somebody can do to you. You're replacing that with something new. And what that does for survivors is just incredible. Yes. But also even what that does for women who maybe did not experience something as brutal of an attack as this woman did, but just saying you start changing your idea of what is possible for you. And that to me is the beauty of jiu-jitsu in general. And that's not just women empowered. I'm sure anyone who trains jiu-jitsu has experienced this at some level where you just go, oh my gosh, I had no idea what my body was capable of. And it does so much for your confidence and for your just understanding of what you are capable of as an individual.
Absolutely. Awesome. Great story.
Yeah.
So let's change gears just a moment here. And you mentioned Henner before, who is another extreme.
Who's that?
Henner.
Just kidding.
I was about to say, who's another? I thought you couldn't hear me. I was going to say, who's another extreme introvert, right?
Oh, yeah. Totally introverted. Right. Hates talking.
Yeah.
Hates hearing himself talk.
So I interviewed him a couple years back, and it was way before you guys had children. So you had your puppy Choki at the time, and he was talking about it at the time that's great experience and practice for when you do eventually have a child. So
yeah, people who say that, you're like, you have no idea what you're doing for.
Right.
Don't you love it when people say that? Like, I'm having a dog so I can practice for a baby. You're like, oh, yep.
So
set yourself up for failure.
No, you're right. You're right. It's one thing to theorize, but it's totally different when it's in the middle of it, right?
You're like, wait, so can I lock my baby in the garage when he's crying? No, you can't do that. You can't leave him home while you do your thing. Yeah, whole different ballgame.
It is a whole different ballgame. You have a beautiful little boy, and I got to see both you guys, this last summer at the Gracie Academy. So tell us a little bit about motherhood. Is it what you thought it would be? Is it different? What's that experience been like for you so far?
Yeah, I think there's always something. I don't think anyone can actually have true expectations of what motherhood is. Like, the best expectation is that you will have your mind blown always, like at every time, because there just is. Like, you can say, oh, I know this is going to be great, and I know this is going to be wonderful, and I know it's going to be hard, but you don't realize in what ways it's hard, and you don't realize in what ways it's going to be wonderful until you actually experience it. So, I've absolutely just loved it. And Haven is he's at such a fun age right now. He's about to be 18 months and just discovering everything about the world and learning new words all the time. And, he's so much fun. I'm finally kind of getting to that point. In the beginning, it's really a challenge, especially as somebody who was always, on the go or traveling or, always, training or whatever. I was always just busy, to really have to slow down your life a little bit and say, okay, I'm going to, there's going to be a period of my life where I'm going to kind of he's going to be my priority. I remember there was kind of a period of time where I felt like, oh my gosh, I felt so useless. Like, I felt like, dude, what did I do today? Like, literally, in my mind, I did nothing. When really, I was doing probably one of the most, important
Yes.
jobs there is. But it's easy to start to feel a little bit, worthless, especially when you're kind of used to having this, like, either high energy or high intensity, either career or training or schedule or whatever that might be. To make that adjustment, you just feel like if you're not doing what you're always doing, you just don't feel like yourself.
Right.
And it's definitely a challenge. And I think I definitely went through that, and it was really hard. And, I'm kind of getting to a point where we got a good balance between, working and not training as much as I would like to be, but, training and teaching, and then obviously family time. So that's the hardest balance, really, is realizing that it's not all about you anymore.
And that's a constant learning and adjusting, right? I mean, sometimes, some days, some weeks you have it really well. Other times you're like, man, what's going on?
Oh, yeah. Sometimes I'm like, I got this. I'm like, this is no big. And then next week you're just like,
somebody help me. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
It's been the absolute most amazing thing I've ever experienced as kids. I mean, it's absolutely the hardest thing. And I came from a background, I had a decent amount of training in psychology of kids. Yeah, I thought I knew something, but I had a few tools, but even so, I know nothing. And it's just been the absolute hardest thing I could have ever imagined, but also the most gratifying. I never knew this kind of love before having kids, and it's just amazing. So
yeah. That's exactly it. You have no idea what that feeling feels like until it's there. It's hard to describe. It's hard to imagine. It's like sometimes they say, like, it hurts. It almost hurts. Like, you love so hard, it hurts a little bit.
Right. So true.
Oh, goodness.
Do you guys plan on having others?
Having others? If it was up to Henner, we'd just
have them all the time.
But, yeah, he knows. But, for sure, at least one. I would say we'll have at least one more, and then reconvene and discuss.
Sure.
Reconvene and discuss where we're at from there. But I know that's how I know I'm getting a little too comfortable with life right now that I already know. Like, that means it's probably coming to pick it up again.
Right.
Now that I've started to figure this out.
Exactly. So let's talk a little bit about Henner.
Mm-hmm.
Tell us how you met, and were you smitten by the Hennergy right away, or did he have to take time to grow on you?
Oh man, I know. I wish I could say I wasn't smitten by it, but that would be a lie. Yeah, it was kind of unfair advantage, to be honest, that he had. So the way that I met Henner was I came in for a private class. And the reason why was because, my introduction was Victoria. Victoria is married to Hito. And Victoria and I were friends from the dance world. We had done a few dance jobs together, and, we always clicked and got along really well. And we didn't talk all the time. She was on tour with dancing for Rihanna. I was on tour with WWE. So we'd catch up every once in a while. But she was the one who said, she's like, I think you would really, I'd love to have you come in. She was kind of talking about jiu-jitsu, and my brother trained jiu-jitsu in high school, mind you. And so I was familiar with it. Plus, I had just signed with WWE. So I knew I was going to be training not only to wrestle, but I was like, this is perfect timing for two reasons. One, I'm going to be traveling by myself at in these weird parts of the country at you're leaving your hotel sometimes at 4 a.m. I was like, I want to feel safe.
Yeah.
And I had already experienced a couple situations where I did not feel safe already in my time on the road. So I was like, it was a no problem selling me on the jiu-jitsu aspect. And then she throws in and she's like, there's somebody I want you to meet. And she's like, oh, but isn't that a big deal? I just want him to kind of see what kind of girls are out there. And, and so she's like, yeah, it's Hito's brother, but, it's no big deal. She tried to really downplay it. So I'm thinking I'm going to go to the academy, take my, do a class, and I'll probably meet this guy a little awkwardly and then just kind of go about my way. No. Henner had already planned the whole thing. He asked Victoria, hey, do you have any friends?
Oh, that's funny.
Do you have any friends that you think you should introduce me to? And she thought of me. And so she brought me in for a private class that Henner taught. So basically I meet Henner, and he, I put on my gi, and then he pulled us in a private room, and now I'm getting my first introduction to jiu-jitsu and Henner in it, at the Gracie Academy in a private room from him. So that's why I say it's kind of an unfair advantage. It's he's in his turf, and he's just
right in his
element. And of course So we started a relationship like anyone. That he held me down and essentially was choking me and strangling me and saying, "How would you get out of this?" And I like tried so hard. I was like really trying to like impress him and show how tough I was.
Right.
Of course, didn't work.
That's funny.
But it's funny. If you ask, so my version of the story is that immediately I was smitten for him. Obviously, like I said, kind of an unfair advantage, just seeing his passion for jiu-jitsu and his charisma and his smile and his freckles and 6'4", all that good stuff. But my kind of approach to everything, again, I'm a little bit more of like an introvert. I kind of like to be a little more subtle with things. So I was like, I'm just going to be a focused, good student. Like, I wasn't like, oh my gosh, this is so cool. Like I was just like, all right, okay, so show me this again. Like I was just more trying hard in the class. He acts like I was like not interested in him at all. When the reality is, I remember the next day we went for like sushi and he talked about jiu-jitsu the entire time. now I know that's totally normal for Henner, but like for the first time you meet somebody, you're like, wow, you didn't ask me one question. You're like, I guess he's not interested. I guess he's just not interested at all in me because he talked about jiu-jitsu the entire time. And yeah, that's Henner for you. But eventually we went on our own separate date and then I got to kind of know him better and he got to know me better. And I was like, okay, that was just his like comfort level default discussion. But obviously the best thing about him was him just being so supportive of me for those 5 years that I traveled nonstop, so, I mean, just the fact that he was that, level of support for me through all of that. And when, the truth is he was actually like, he was a workaholic. So it probably was better that way that I was gone 5 days a week. So he would be like at the academy till like midnight working on Gracie University. That was kind of the inception of GU, was around that time. So he was working like crazy. I was working like crazy. So it was kind of a good time in both of our lives to make that happen.
Yeah. And then when you did see each other, you guys could commit fully to being present with each other.
Exactly. It's kind of like every week you're like more excited to see each other than
That's great.
each other every day.
Great.
You know how it is. Yeah.
Yeah. You guys make an awesome couple.
Thank you. Thanks.
Do you have any hobbies off the mat, Eve? I know you have a lot of things going on and then your family being the priority and training and everything else you're doing. And do you have time for anything off the mat, other hobbies? And if so, what do you do?
Yeah. So aside from jiu-jitsu training, I've actually started in the last couple of years doing some other like stand-up stuff too, just like taekwondo and boxing and Muay Thai a little bit. So I do a little bit of that, which I like just to have different things. And to me, that one's more of just like a, exercise. And then I like to throw parties a lot. I actually have another business that I started with Henner's sister, my sister-in-law, Sage, called Enjoy the Party. And we ultimately help people put together awesome parties. So we're kind of like party planners, but ultimately what we do is we pre-package like themed parties. So this is something that's like, there might be some people out there that in some parts of the country like, why the heck would anyone care about this? But, for especially our demographic, and this is something Sage and I have always liked doing, is when we throw parties for our nephews or nieces, we just get really into it. And so, if you have like a princess theme, or tutus and tiaras is one of our themes. And, you basically just deck it all out with decorations. So we basically have all of that stuff. We pre-package it and then we offer it to people. So if somebody says, hey, my daughter wants a princess party, we have all the stuff already ready to go and we just rent it to them. And then we help coordinate some of the other kind of planning elements as well. And so having that business as well has obviously also kept me very busy, but it's just kind of another side passion of mine.
Nice.
Of putting together just fun events and fun parties and throwing parties for the people I love. It's something I've always loved doing.
Wow. So you kind of parlay your interests and hobbies into businesses, or into a business in this case.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, that's ultimately what makes the best business.
I agree.
I think.
How's it going so far with
it?
that?
It's going great. This is kind of the first year, I think obviously with Haven, first year of me I was like pregnant when the company was like the inception of the company was when I was pregnant. And then obviously the first year with Haven being so young, it was a little hard to manage a business. Mm-hmm. And I find that a lot of people do this, like women, when you're pregnant, you're like, oh, I like, all of a sudden you get into this like kind of mode of like, I need to provide something for my children, like aside from what I'm doing. I don't know why. I've seen so many women do this. So like, let's start a business, not realizing like how much work it's going to be after. But it's worked out really well. Like Sage and I work great together, and it's something, again, I love to do. It's something kind of different from kind of more artistic and just different from anything else that I've done. So I like having that as part of my life.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So who's had the biggest impact on your life so far, Eve? And that could be personally or professionally.
Yeah, that's a good question. So my default answer for that, because it's like just the first place my mind always goes, probably because it's true, is my mother, just because she's kind of been the staple of, or she's kind of taught me, I think, the most important kind of values that I still carry with me, which is hard work and something that she knows too much about. And I would say hard work, I would say compassion. And yeah, she just has really shown, and strength ultimately. Like my mom is one of the strongest people I've ever met. And so having that kind of role model for me growing up, and then now as a woman in her 30s who's starting her own family, I think it's really been really valuable to have that, somebody just to talk with, somebody to, model myself after. And so ultimately I would probably say she's had the biggest influence on my life.
Sounds like an awesome lady.
She is a very awesome lady. Yes.
Yeah. And she really set the stage for your life by being that model for you and instilling those really important, that inner drive, that strength and that determination and work ethic. So, man, it's nice. It's very nice that you.
Yeah. And it's showed me how important it is, like as a parent, that really that's all you, it sounds simple. That's all you need to do. But like, really just living, just modeling that is all you need. You can tell your children, you can try to tell them things, you can try to teach them lessons in other ways, but the best way for children to learn anything is just by modeling it for them. And that's ultimately how I learned that from my mom. Wow. My mom didn't say work hard. She just worked really hard, and I witnessed that. And I, happened to model myself after her because of that. So
that's very powerful, because what you said, modeling is the ultimate. You can say a lot, but kids are really always watching, and they see how you are and how you conduct yourself and what's important to you. And yeah, they're going to pick it all up. And modeling, like you said, not to oversimplify it, because it's a demanding job and a great job, but it's
easier
also
said than done. Just be a good person. But sometimes kids bring every stress brings the worst out of us.
That's true. It's
Obviously,
true.
There are some stressful situations being parents.
But that's important too. Just showing them, it's okay to be human, and you're not perfect, and you make mistakes and everything, and that's okay. How you handle yourself in the mistakes.
Exactly.
So, yeah. All right.
No, it's so important.
No, I agree completely. So, do you have a favorite motto or quote that you live by?
You know what? There's so many. The one that I always goes, my kind of, I don't know, fallback is just, she believed she could, so she did. Mm. And that's, to me, I feel like that has been something that I wasn't sure would actually be true. And I think me growing up, I always doubted. I was always somebody who doubted myself more than I believed in myself. And then when I finally realized, it's okay to believe in yourself. Like, it's okay to feel, to really want something, and then maybe it doesn't happen, or maybe you fail or whatever. But it's like, sometimes it's harder to believe in yourself than it is to doubt. It's easy to doubt yourself. Mm-hmm. Just say, I probably can't do that. It's much harder to actually really believe and tell yourself, like, no, you actually can do this and you will do this. But once you kind of allow yourself to do that, it just opens up the door for so many things. And like I kind of explained a little bit about my experience with WWE, but I think that was really the lesson that taught me. And I still go by that. And it's hard sometimes, because like I said, I think my natural instinct is to always feel like the rug is going to be pulled out from underneath me, or like things are too good to be true, or, I'm always kind of doubting the situation. And I've just had to really learn how to let go of that. And it's it's taken time, but it's ultimately, part of that is by proving to myself that this is what really works. And I think I've done that for a few different things. Is that, no, if I allow myself to believe in myself, then it's really amazing what can happen, but it's scary.
It is.
It's scary to do that.
But you know, it's a beautiful and powerful thing, and I think it makes your impact that much stronger and better, because it's one thing to have someone who people can look up to and look what all this person's done and accomplished with their life. But it's another to know that person has struggled and, you know, with self-doubt and had to overcome and still struggles at times and still was able to push through it and find a way to really, you know, make great things happen. That's a great impact. It's a great example.
Yeah, it is. And I mean, like I said, it's something I constantly battle with for different areas of my life. Like there might be one area that I'm like, oh, this is going great. And then another where I say, oh, this is never going to, you know, like, or it's not going to pan out the way I wanted, or I just might as well give up on this, or, you know, and it's really important, I think, to let go of that doubt. I think it's a sign of intelligence. My belief is that, you know, people who are obviously a little bit more cautious or a little bit like, oh, you know, is this going to happen the way I want it to? I think it is a sign of, you know, intelligence in some people to question things, but ultimately, you know, you can't overthink anything. Yeah. You can't overthink everything, or you won't accomplish anything.
Well, it's also can be a form of, you know, protection, self-protection. You don't want to be caught off guard, and you want to prepare 100%. Yourself for the worst, you know, should something happen.
You don't want to let yourself down either. You don't really want to go for something and then fail.
That's
but,
right.
You know, failure, it's crazy the things that have come out of failures.
Yeah,
you know?
So true. You know, the power, your perspective is everything, and the power of belief, like you said in that motto or that quote, the power of belief is everything. And, you know, I'm a big believer in, you know, positive self-messages and talks and quotes, stuff like that. So I constantly read things, I constantly listen to things, and it's, you know, people say, well, that motivation stuff doesn't last. And you say, well, neither does brushing your teeth. That's why you have to do it daily and condition yourself, you know? Yeah. So it's kind of the same with this, you know, the power of belief. You have to build it on a daily basis.
You totally do. And like the one person that's really helped me with that and really shown me what can be done is Henner. You know, there's one thing I'll say about Henner is he believes in his, you know, in his mission. He believes in what he does. He believes in his ideas, and he'll have an idea and he will be relentless with that idea. As you can see with Gracie University, you know, with, you know, all the programs he's created. Once he has an idea and he believes in it, he is absolutely relentless until that idea is accomplished. And I've seen him have failures. You know, I've seen him get really, really excited about something and go, and it not pan out the way he wanted. But what I love about it is that never turned into him, you know, second guessing his next idea ever. Right. He just said, all right, he learned some value. Okay, this is why that, you know, I have to tweak this or that didn't work because of this. And he just goes. And so, you know, he's somebody who's just model. And he's also, it's nice also to have somebody who believes in you as well.
Yeah,
because
absolutely.
Like, as I said, you know, it's hard to have that 100% belief. And you're like, well, is this a good idea? I don't know. Like, will this work? And, you know, to have somebody else say, oh my gosh, this is, you know, this is great. You can do that, and like to someone to bounce ideas off of, and someone to really ultimately just believe that you can do what you say, and he believes in you as much as you do, or maybe even more.
Yeah, that's a great combination. You know, to have some people who kind of say, okay, let's not just go off unbridled. Let's kind of weigh everything. Let's step back and think about it. And then you got someone else who's like, let's go full steam, and kind of bounce things back and forth on each other. It's great, a great combination to do that. Keeps it in check, but also, you know, helps with that belief and that motivation.
Yeah, we're like the number one, checking each other's ideas a little bit, like, well, what about this? You know, we're always devil's advocate, but at the end of the day, we like, you know, it's all support and you know, awesome. Belief in our abilities.
Awesome. So, Eve, you've obviously done a lot in your life, and WWE, movies, dance, TV shows, you know, women's empowered, so many things. And looking back over that, and you've got, of course, got a lot of life to live yet, but in looking back so far, what are you the most proud of?
Honestly, probably 30 hours of labor. And pushing a baby out at the end of it. I remember specifically thinking that when I was done. I was like, I've done a lot of stuff in my life, and this pretty much tops all of it.
Wow.
It was, yeah. But I think, I mean, that's pride. To me, that was pride in something that was, you know, I don't know. It was just another moment of like, okay, there you can go through some really hard and grueling things and be okay, you know? So I think that would be one of them. And, you know, ultimately I would say that another big something probably besides that, one of the things I am proudest of, or one of the most proud of, is the growth of Women Empowered. I'm really, you know, it's really near and dear to my heart. And, you know, seeing the growth, seeing the impact it's having on others, and knowing that it really is just like anything. You water it, you believe in it, and it grows. And that's how I really feel. And I feel like it's only the beginning. And we can have a whole nother podcast sometime just about that. But yeah, there's so much growth to be still possible. But just seeing where it's coming, and just finally seeing women like recognize that they are capable of not only defending themselves, but they are capable of some pretty awesome things. And not just kind of discrediting themselves from, you know, being able to participate in the sport of jiu-jitsu is really important. I think the more women that train jiu-jitsu, the better our world will be.
Couldn't agree more. So as we're coming to a close, anyone that you want to thank or shout out to, Eve?
Well, I guess I'm like all the people that support me. No, I'm honestly, I'm still lucky. I have so many people that just are so supportive, and that I have amazing female friends. I have amazing sister-in-laws. I have an amazing husband. I'm really lucky. So I could sit here and name like 10 people, but right. I'll just say that I feel very lucky for the people that have, you know, supported me in both my jiu-jitsu journey, you know, training partners and Henner and, you know, business and everything else.
Awesome. Well, I want to thank you very much for taking the time to give us a little glimpse into your life. And again, you've accomplished so much. You've had such an impact on people. So you have my utmost respect, and keep doing what you're doing.
Thank you so much. I hope there wasn't too much noise going on in the interview. I was actually in my car the entire time so that I did not have Haven interrupt us.
But
there was
awesome.
Like a guy going by with a leaf blower and then like a truck going by. So hopefully you guys didn't hear that sound. But anyway, it was a pleasure to be on the podcast and great conversation.
You know, I love it. It just shows that you'll do whatever it takes to get it done. That's great.
Whatever it takes, we're going to get it done.
Well, thank you so much, and I wish you a long, healthy life, and we'll be talking soon.
Thanks, Marty. Hope to see you soon.
All right. Take care. Okay, really enjoyed talking with Eve. She's such an interesting and inspiring person who's accomplished so much and is such a great role model for the jiu-jitsu world. Next up is the Make a Difference, Make an Impact segment. Okay, time now for the Make a Difference, Make an Impact segment. Let's start with a short quote. By my actions, teach my mind. And that's from William Shakespeare. Okay, let's talk about becoming what we practice most. Repeated practice is one of the most basic principles of most spiritual and meditative paths. In other words, whatever you practice most is what you will become. If you're in the habit of being uptight whenever life isn't quite right, repeatedly reacting to criticism by defending yourself, insisting on being right, allowing your thinking to snowball in response to adversity, then unfortunately, your life will be a reflection of this type of practice. You'll be frustrated because, in a sense, you have practiced being frustrated. Likewise, however, you can choose to bring forth in yourself qualities of compassion, patience, kindness, humility, and peace. Again, through what you practice. I guess it's safe to say that practice makes perfect. It makes sense then to be careful what you practice. Now, this isn't to suggest that you make your entire life into a great big project where the goal is to be constantly improving yourself. Only that it's immensely helpful to become conscious of your own habits, both internal and external. Where is your attention? How do you spend your time? Are you cultivating habits that are helpful to your stated goals? Is what you say you want your life to stand for consistent with what your life really stands for? Simply asking yourself these and other important questions and answering them honestly helps to determine which strategies will be most helpful to you. Have you always said to yourself, I'd like to spend more time by myself, or I've always wanted to learn to meditate, yet somehow you've never found the time? Sadly, many people spend far more time washing their car or watching reruns of a television show that they don't even enjoy than they do making time for aspects of their life that nurture their hearts. If you remember that what you practice, you will become, you may begin choosing different types of practice. So as you go through your day, your week, your month, I invite you to keep this thought in mind, that we become what we practice most. And that's going to do it for this edition of the show. As always, I thank you for listening. I appreciate all feedback, so if you have feedback, please don't hesitate to give it. If you have ideas for the show or for guests, please let me know about those. You can leave feedback on the website at www.graciejujitsurocks.com. You can also leave feedback on iTunes, and while you're there, make sure to rate the show. It helps us with our standing in iTunes. If you haven't liked us on Facebook or follow us on Twitter, please go ahead and do that. And don't forget to share the episodes on your Facebook and social media. Again, thanks again for listening, and until next time, this is Marty Josie, and I'll see you on the mat.